One of the very difficult commandments of Christ is the one to love our enemies. This commandment, along with the teaching of Christ to turn the other cheek, is very difficult for most people to understand and even more difficult to practice. It seems to go against our nature to love those who would treat us poorly or with disrespect, or worse, those who would want to harm us. Isn't it better to practice an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth? Today, I would like to look at this difficult mandate of our Lord's to see if we can make some sense of this most difficult commandment. First of all, it is important to understand what is meant by our enemies. Our enemies are those who hate us and have animosity towards us, those who would wish us harm. This does not mean that we are necessarily their enemies. Being enemies is not always a reciprocal relationship. For instance, the wolf is the enemy of the lamb, but the lamb is not the enemy of the wolf. As followers of Christ, we will have enemies in this world. Jesus told his disciples that if the world hated him, they would surely hate his followers as well. Christ is telling us not to give in to hate, to animosity, to vengeance. And the greatest example of someone practicing what he preached was Jesus himself, who, while hanging from the cross, asked his Father to forgive those who sought his own destruction. Being a Christian involves trying to live a life in imitation of Christ. This is not natural. It is a supernatural gift. The gift to be like Christ, made possible only by God's grace. By grace, we have become friends of God. Grace conforms us to God. It makes us not only his friends, but his children. We should love all people, our neighbors, our friends, yes, and even our enemies, because God, the creator of all, loves them. He desires their good, and we should also desire the good for them. Within this context, we can see the truthfulness of that dictum, hate the sin, but love the sinner. The sinner, as a person created by God, is to be loved. The sinner, to the degree that he or she lacks goodness or virtue, is not lovable on that account. Our enemies, those who would do us harm, those who sin against us, are not doing what they should, even by nature's standards, not to mention the demands and dictates of grace. But they are to be loved because as a creature of God, they are potentially children of God. God desires the good of the sinner and gives all people sufficient grace to answer his call. So why love your enemy? Because he may be your brother someday. Till next time, God bless.